Hi, I'm Andrew. Welcome to One Shot's Tavern, a TTRPG podcast where we seek out new ways to tell your stories through different systems and games. And today, I'm talking to Jon Gunnison of NotHandsome, talking about your latest project, Fabled Empire. Fabled Empire is a Dungeons & Dragons 5e compatible fairytale supplement, inspired by the works of Jim Henson, Tolkien, Lewis Carroll, Hayao Miyazaki, and a bunch more. Jon, just right out the gate, those are some heavy-hitting inspirations to be pulling from that hit me right in, like, my kid nostalgia.
Yeah.
I want to start by talking about genre, because whenever we, like, include touchstones on any creative project, you know, you're saying, hey, guys, like, this is the kind of vibe. And with fairy tales, we all have, I think, a different relationship with those. So for Fabled Empire, I want to talk first about what playing in the pool, if you will, or the genre of fairy tales has been like, and what do you like out of it for your storytelling?
Yeah, I really love the Jim Henson, especially as like a core inspiration there. I grew up with a series called The Storyteller, which is just incredible. Love the puppetry, love the narrative style, but also that like darker, grittier presentation. So really chasing after a whimsy dark approach with the within a fairy tale tone. I think that, you know, within the Dungeons and Dragons like universe, you do get some of that with the Feywild, but I really wanted to dip further into more of those absolutes that you get with fairy tales, and the having more of that like Western approach or adaptation of fairy tales.
That's cool. I mean, when I if you ask my wife, like, I won't shut up about Jim Henson, because like, as a creative and, you know, somebody that likes to do props and minis and terrain, and I've done all that stuff over the years. I don't do nearly as much now because most of my stuff's online. But like Jim Henson, I was like, I want to work at the Jim Henson Company, working on their props and their puppets, and like, because the way, not only that it was a practical effect all the time that you were looking at, not all the time, but most of the time, it was all practical. It was just, it captured a realism because it was practical, married with the fantastical, but it never, when it veered towards creepy, it never was like, I don't know, adult creepy, but it still wasn't childish either. Yeah. Like it was this space where in other fairy tales where there was like the cautionary tale, like the kind of stories that were told to kids to make sure they didn't literally run off into the woods when people lived in cottages, you know, like that kind of tone where like, hey, there are real dangers out there, but you're still a kid and it's okay, you know? And like that tone is something I don't think I've actually played with too much in my games. Mm-hmm. And I you know, our listeners know I've been working on Battle School, which is loosely inspired by like Ender's Game and stuff. So I'm writing a game that's about, you know, being a kid, but dealing with war crimes, you know. So adult themes married with some more childish tone. So specific to that, when it comes to working on Fabled Empire, you're building a setting book at the end of the day, right? It's about this location, and so you're bringing in mechanics, but really your storytelling is environmental. So let's talk about what gets you excited about Fabled Empire. Pick something that's on your mind that you really, really love, and really, it doesn't have to be the thing, you know, that makes the setting special, but, you know, what gets you excited about Fabled Empire setting?
Yeah, I think it's being able to introduce, I guess, genuine kooky characters or like oddball characters, and being able to play with that. It is certainly a line, because I don't want to come off or like create anything that feels absurd to the point of, oh, well, what's really, or gives players the impression that there really isn't any purpose in doing anything.
Right.
Because I think that you could certainly fall into that direction when you start playing with, I guess, like silly
like
themes.
walking the line between gonzo and still being a little
Yeah.
bit grounded.
Yeah, and so I want to be able to present these this world, and specifically within the within Dungeons and Dragons, it's isolated to a demiplane. So you have
Okay.
all of this like unique adaptation outside of the Fey realms.
Uh-huh.
So like having more of those like Lewis Carroll characters, for
Yeah,
instance.
interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So, when it comes to what's the name of the setting? Because Fabled Empire is a
Uh,
book. I'm assuming there's like a
Yeah, it's Etheria
Etheria.
currently.
Awesome.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So in Etheria, like, what are some of the? Whenever I've worked on setting material, it's like I
yeah,
want to create hooks everywhere, right? Like, the idea is you're giving somebody a toolkit, and when somebody is dealing with Etheria, if I parallel it, because you mentioned a demiplane, if I
yeah,
parallel it to a very commonly understood one, Ravenloft. Ravenloft has, you get transferred in through the mists, and then there's
yeah,
this big bad villain of Strahd, but then you start to understand the dark powers, right? So you've kind of got these pillars, not only that denote your journey into another world, but also kind of give you tent poles for what, make up why even play with this. So
yeah,
what are some of those tent poles? How do I get to Etheria? Take me there.
yeah, yeah. So not dissimilar from the Feywilds. It's a location that's not mirrored directly to the world, or the
Yeah.
plane of existence. So it is different, a lot like Ravenloft, to where you'll enter and it's a like unique landscape outside of what would be something that you would find within the Forgotten Realms setting,
Right.
for instance. The uh, the differences that I think are almost immediate is the way that there's like heavy suspicion of Fey influence. So going back to more of that like Celtic
Yeah.
mythology. So it's not just, you go into the political intrigue of the Fey courts that you have with Feywild. It's more of this suspicion that, milk is going bad because of fairy influence or Fey
Yeah.
influence. Animal folk are plentiful. So I know that could be a, a, a touchy inclusion for some folks. But I did
So
really
there's
want to build
potential
out a
for
cast.
furries,
Yeah.
and there's potentially treats for furries.
Yeah, yeah.
You can play with that like a slider. The volume can go up or down as much as you want.
Yeah, the way, because I know the official Dungeons and Dragons did introduce some with the Beyond Witchlight
Yeah.
campaign, and I just wanted to provide more variety within that. So,
So did you build out like custom ancestries for like different subtypes of animals, or what'd you do with that mechanically?
so it's not player facing as much as it's NPC
Okay.
at this point.
More
I
world
think that
building side.
there is the possibility that they'll like develop into races, but they are a unique thing to the land of Etheria.
Yeah.
And they're all built off of kind of the Winds in the Willow style, like animal
Yeah.
type folk, where frogs wear suits, for
Yeah.
instance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they look like a fraud.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and it's really at this point in the lore, it's that it's a choice for an animal to kind of leave the forest or the wilderness and become a part of society. So they all have like different aspects in how they contribute.
That's cool.
So for instance, like certain animals have like better sense,
Yeah.
or sense of smell, and so it's how do they kind of incorporate themselves within that, within like human societies,
Yeah.
or tiefling society, dwarven societies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about like the land of Etheria, right? What kind of culturally is it mostly just little villages in the woods? Are there large cities? Like what level of metropolitan,
Yeah, it would be kingdoms,
Okay.
because we're talking about fairy tales. So you have kingdoms, you have abandoned castles, you have hamlets, villages, um, maybe some like larger metropolitan areas. Yeah,
Very cool.
and then of course like pirate islands, because Peter Pan, it's in that influence as well.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to pull that in for sure. Um, okay, so tell me about this project and its inception, right, for you.
Yeah.
How long you been working on this project and what got it all started for you?
So about what, a year, maybe 2 years at this point, I was I gotten back into playing Dungeons and Dragons Fifth Edition, and was kind of just interested in evolving the rules, seeing like what I could do to create within that space. That turned into and previously I had been like DMing for over what, about 13 years, and that had primarily been, so I started with fourth edition and then jumped into some other games.
I'll have you know,
I-
we have a certain respect for fourth edition around here, so don't worry.
Oh, good. Yeah, I enjoyed the cards. I wish
Yeah.
yeah. The but I got back into fifth edition and had started playing it and thinking about like how to I guess optimize it, like
Sure.
almost everybody
For
tries
your
to do.
style kind of thing, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So just doing a lot of heavy home brewing. And then that kind of evolved into wanting to create a system. And that system is still being worked out. But I wanted to like secure a specific theme onto it. And so initially, I think the mechanics aligned to more of like a primitive hunting, or a primitive like style. It was more of like a card game
Okay.
approach, but that was like super early on, and then it aligned a lot more with like OSR adjacent.
Yeah.
And so that's the inception of this, and I had aligned to doing or committing to fairy tales about like half a year in. And that's where a lot of this like lore evolved.
Right. Yeah. What's so you went and you've been working on this book for a couple years now. And then at what point did you kind of lock in and say, we're going to be doing 5e and I want to make this more than just an idea. I want to make this a book.
Yeah, so with the OSR rule set, it already had the fairy tale theme attached to it, and I wanted to kind of pitch that into a marketplace. So I had an initial Kickstarter. I think that the OSR space is still very small, and I needed a much larger audience, because the bigger the better in that, within crowdfunding. And I just felt like, maybe it would be easier to bring this into fruition, to pursue a fifth edition supplement. That way I could produce the artwork specifically for the book, and get the do a lot more rich like world building as well, because when it's a system, I feel like the lore tends to be pretty thin. And so being able to approach it as, this is a campaign book, I could build that out and spend more time within that.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so you just wrapped up on your Kickstarter. Your goal was 8,000. You guys got to 6,000. So unfortunately, you didn't meet your goal, but that's a hell of a lot of support. That's a lot of people that are excited about this book. Your marketing hit me. I found you through TikTok. I saw stuff about the book, and I was like, this sounds super fun. So I'm excited to see where it goes. As far as plans going forward, we talked about it a little bit before recording. Unfortunately, when you don't hit your funding goal on Kickstarter, they say bye-bye. You don't get any money. And you're kind of left with essentially made a lot of connections, right? Like you've got kind of a marketing arm of some people that had intended to back the project. There's a lot of people excited for this. I want to know what your kind of next steps are, what you think you're going to do next. Are there plans for future funding, where you may change your scope or anything like that?
Yeah, I think the scope might change a bit. I don't feel like I have an interest in continuing to pursue crowdfunding.
Yeah.
So it will be something that is independently funded until it becomes available for sale. Print editions might come after digital editions.
Yeah.
But I still want to bring this to fruition, provide it for folks to play. Certainly made a lot of connections through these Kickstarter campaigns, just want to continue to bring the 5th edition supplement, as well as as mentioned before, like bring that into a separate game to fruition as well after that 5th edition supplement.
So we're nerds over here that have spent a lot of our journey, at least the last year or so, venturing out of the 5e space, even though we still enjoy dabbling. Tell me more about the OSR side of it, like the mechanics of what you were designing around and what kind of niche you were carving out of that design space.
Yeah, so I would say the core inspiration is Into the Odd, by Chris McDowell. That's my favorite OSR.
I still have to play it. I've read it. I have got a lot of friends that love it, but man, I haven't played it yet.
Yeah, and now at this point, with given this time to pull back from that core and have more reflection, I certainly need to do a lot more research on the Cypher system, which has more of a modern approach.
Yeah,
but I feel like they have similarities within the attribute pools.
Yep.
Because that's something that in the Odd, what pulls me into the Odd is the ability to you can drain your well, I guess it's like you have your hit points or hit protection, and then you have this I forget exactly what it's called.
So ciphers are our favorite long-term campaign system around here. I basically, so DJ, who's not feeling great today, he played in a group with me for years and years, and we started in 3.5, then we did 5e, and then I was like, damn it, we're going to play something else. And so I dragged all my friends. I'm like, we're playing Cypher, because I knew about Numenera. And I was like, Numenera is so freaking cool, but it's really weird. So I'll just homebrew some stuff and run Cypher. And Cypher was my gateway drug into actually diving into the design space and saying, oh man, there are ways to kind of fundamentally reinvent how I interact with these kind of stories. Because up until that point, any homebrew was really just, it was a D20 hack, right? It didn't, for me, it just kept being the same kind of stuff. And then I'd run into well, I don't need to do this, and I'm like, yeah, there's already rules for it. But yeah, Cypher, big fans around here. It is my favorite system. You can see Numenera books back there.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. I love that.
I do agree with you that Numenera is odd.
It's so weird. I love it. It's really weird. And that's kind of what, to circle it back to Fabled Empire, that's something that's tricky about new books, especially new systems. But when you don't have a touchstone for something like Numenera, you really don't. You kind of might, but it's weird. It's really weird. And when you're trying to convince people to play a new game with you, that's a problem.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter how cool it is if they're I don't know how to relate to it. There's no tropes for me to play off of. There's no, character concepts that I can rip off and basically play Han Solo. They lack a lot of touchstones. And so I think that with fairytale, it's so easy to just quickly be like, I'm doing Big Bad Wolf. Let's go. Like, or just like, I'm going to play Red Riding Hood. I'm going to, and just like pick a trope, lean into it, and then break it, and then play around in it. And I think that that's the nice thing about playing with something that has such a common touchstone.
Yeah, and I initially, like, when developing like the fairy tale theme, I had the assumption that I had to play on those like darker themes, because I think that there is like a bit of a there's a bit of a murder hobo like within all players, and it's kind of like, oh well, that it's interesting to play fairy tales, but what do I stab, right? Like what do I do? But being able to just get like feedback from like TikTok, YouTube audiences on like, oh, what would you like in fairy tales, and getting the reaction of, oh, let's go to the staples, let's like go to what I know, which is Big Bad Wolf or Red Riding Hood, Hansel Gretel, right? And kind of leaving out those darker side or those darker bits was certainly something that had lent me or allowed me to feel a lot more comfortable with leaning into that. Still have that like edge though of you don't want to go gonzo.
Totally. I mean, we played a charity stream a couple months back where DJ ran Cypher, and we played. They have a I don't remember what it's called. They have a Cypher book out for fairy tale stuff, and
we're all mad here.
That one, and like. I said Big Bad Wolf because that's what I played. I was like, I'm playing Big Bad Wolf because I never play fighters because in a lot of systems, fighters are kind of boring unless you super optimize them. And so like I was always the wizard or whatever. But I always want to be a frontline idiot smashing everything. And so Cypher kind of made room for that to be a bit more interesting. And so I'm like, I'm playing Big Bad Wolf, and it was a phenomenal, fun stream. But like what was cool was like we had Humpty Dumpty, we had Big Bad Wolf, we had all these things, and it kind of fell into like somewhere. Are you familiar with the Wolf Among Us games?
Yeah.
It was kind of like that. Yeah, like Fables, yes, the comics. It was kind of tonally like that, but still like, kind of Wizard of Oz, like somewhere in there, like still pretty kooky and weird, but like it still felt like somebody could get murdered, like it was like that kind of reality. And I think it allowed, like I was saying earlier, like it allowed for a lot of commonality for us to be like, okay, we know what game we're playing.
Oh yeah.
And then like inviting in the playfulness of that, but still, having a fun, violent game of D&D at the end of the day, like it's that kind of experience.
Yeah, and like you mentioned earlier, like having that Han Solo touchstone,
right?
Like it's what makes the Star Wars games great. Is everybody gets this, right?
Yeah, like
nobody.
I'm not
nobody
terribly...
goes. What's an aluminum falcon, right?
Right.
Everybody's like, no, I know this.
Right. What's the there's like a in the Edge of the Empire or whatever. There's like a whole character type that's basically Han Solo. It's like, okay, this is how I play Han Solo.
Smuggler, right?
Yeah. I think it's just the smuggler. That's so cool. So within, let's get back to the setting because I want to get to know this place a little bit in Etheria. Let's talk about villains because I adore centering stories around villains, especially when I've worked on my own settings. I've looked at not, at least for me, like I've really tried to not make the monolith bad guy. I'm like, there are bad people, there are factions. Like I try to do a lot of that so that I'm not boxed in to like, it's just Strahd von Zarovich. For you, what was your approach to creating the bigger, larger than life antagonists throughout the world, and what does it look like out there to get into trouble?
Yeah, I think it was important for me to find and they're villain archetypes specifically, so they're not a specific
this is Steve
individual.
the bad guy. It's
it's kind of like these
framework
frameworks that you can adopt into creating your own big bad.
I like that. That's nice.
Yeah, just because I think I don't want it to be like, oh, that's the bad guy, let's get him. Right. And then everybody throws their level 9 spells at him and they're gone. Right.
Yep.
I want it to be a little bit looser in how they're presented.
Yeah.
And flexible, but they are all built off of, really the kind of common villain archetypes. I think I had like 30 ideas, and then had kind of like brewed them down.
Yeah.
Especially with how lengthy they have to be.
Yeah.
So
making a 5e stat block is a whole lot of work.
Yeah, I tried to fit, because I also want to go by it's a 6x9 book.
Yeah.
As well, and I tried to fit the vampire stat block in there, which I think is the
Isn't
largest.
it 2 pages? Is it 3?
Yeah,
remember.
it's 2. It's 2. I think
So big
because it like trails off into like a little separate one, but yeah, I'm
as
doing
a designer,
as much as I can.
Just to rabbit trail for a second. As a designer, like I have such a bone to pick with how stat blocks are. I'm like, this could be done fundamentally differently. It's not that it's just it's a bunch of information, it's laid out poorly. It's that I don't need all this information. That's why I love Cypher, right? Like in Cypher, I'm like, I know the bad guy can be this level, these modifications. Like I feel like I can take some of that knowledge whenever I go back and run 5e stuff and just simplify so much, because it's like, it doesn't matter if he has all 6 stats and they're all 25 and stuff like that, like that's not interesting for the player. They want a challenge, so you need good couple reference DCs for when they're attacked. How do they attack? What are they attacking with? Like, we can make this vampire a lot shorter. Because they don't even have a spell list.
Yeah, it's been interesting to see Bob World Builders series on stat blocks, because he has a big enough audience to get good reactions within his redesign, and it has been, I think it's been most interesting to see the commentary on the shadow block or shadow dark style.
Okay, I need to check that game out. I've heard so much about it. Yeah, that's super cool.
Yeah, super like modern OSRE.
Right, because it's still taking a lot of what people crave in 5e, right? Then a dungeon delve, but it's it's its own take, and it's really elegant from what I understand. I've read too many games. I really need to play more of these damn games. It's the worst.
Yeah. I think Shadow Dark is the most approachable OSR game. And then I don't know about like over on the narrative side what would be the most approachable, because Powered by the Apocalypse is pretty difficult for a lot.
Yeah, and I think that I'm still like terribly underversed in like all the terminologies. Like people throw on NSR, OSR, and I'm like, I've had this explained to me so many times, but I feel like somebody will say a game is NSR, and then they'll say it's OSR, and then they'll say it's something else. And I'm like, you know what? I like TTRPGs.
I don't really believe in NSR as much as I do OSR adjacent.
Okay.
Which is like, we're gonna brand as OSR because we believe in the philosophies that exist within the OSR, but we're not based on Dungeons and Dragons. We're not reviving anything. In a way, we're like doing our own. Yeah, and I think that's what NSR is referring to as well.
It's it's
get me in the comments if I'm wrong.
Right, for real. Oh my gosh, I so don't care. Tell me what I'm saying wrong, because I don't care enough to be right about being wrong. And usually
I just came here for silly games. Okay?
Right? Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's like I'm really good at actualing some stuff. This is not something I care enough about to actually. Man. Yeah, because it's funny, because I started doing enough design on the side of like working on Battle School, and had people throwing around those terms in reference to the rule set, and I'm like, Didn't know that. I didn't know that about my game. I guess it feels like that. But like,
Yeah.
hopefully I've carved out a unique niche. We'll see. People are getting their hands on it now. But yeah, I'm always intrigued when people take the plunge into building out their own system and carving out a space in the mechanics of game design, because like if you wanted to critique it, you could be like, that's the most arrogant thing you could do because everybody has already made every good system. It's like, that's reductive and not true. Yeah. It's like there's so many cool new things you can do with these rules. We're playing make believe, like you have so much room to create your own flavor, your own genre of that play. And so when people build out a setting or they build out a rule set and they're doing something to drive that sort of play and that commonality, that's interesting to me. That's exciting. So what's your background? Like outside of like games and stuff, like you took the plunge into a fairly large scoped project. What kind of, I see guitars behind you. So you've got music as a background, but creatively, what are you bringing to the table when you jumped into this project, and what kind of support do you have? I saw some other people on your team there.
Yeah. So, I guess professionally for almost as long as, or longer than I've been playing tabletop role-playing games, I've been a software engineer, and that primarily like focuses on design. So I'm the one in design doing layout, along with writing, along with art direction, etc. in this project. I'm pretty like well accustomed to it, just being specifically a front end software developer. So I do awesome. Like interfaces and stuff.
That's cool. Because I've worked in marketing and worked in graphic design and creative work for years and stuff. So I was bringing that to the table when I jumped into this, which is a huge boon. Like I have friends that are like, hey, I want to put out a book, and then they like start and they've got their Google Doc, and then they're like, okay, now what? I'm like, you're gonna have to learn a lot, or you're gonna have to hire somebody.
Yeah. Layout was definitely a curveball for me, just because it's so outside of like I'm used to doing like cascading style sheets for websites. So like the design, like where to pixel push is there. It's just it's all of the terminology and dimensions and
picas. Picas is stupid. Don't use picas. Oh my gosh.
So jumping into that deep end, but I feel like I've got it now. Because now I think I've spent enough time, not that I'm a master of it, but I can at least like get it done. I can execute really well.
So would you say you're a fairly proficient graphic designer on top of doing just general like web dev, or not web dev, but software dev?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I've hung around within that space like long enough. I know like
what is a graphic designer, right? Like everybody's a graphic. I have Canva.
I feel like they're the unofficial product manager. That's,
right. I noticed the primary artist shares your last name. Is that a sibling or a partner?
Yeah, so that's a sibling.
Okay. That's fun.
So yeah, I had reached out to them because they went to school for art, and I was like, who can you recommend? Yeah. Like, is there anybody? And they were like, oh yeah, I'll do it. Yeah. I'll do it. That's awesome. So we've been working on the style. Certainly we collaborated on the style. And then there was another artist that did a lot of like the color work for promotional. I'm still thinking about how to perhaps like incorporate their style. So that's like a more painterly approach. And that was me looking for a specific artist as well.
That's cool. I mean, one of my favorite parts, and I did 90% of the art on my own book, but I loved that I got to hire anybody to work. It was easily my favorite part of just being able to extend a crazy creative project outside of myself and see what somebody else's brain did with it, you
Yeah.
know? It's like, hey, here's this weird thing that I've been thinking of. What do you got? And they're like, and you're like, what? Oh my gosh, that's not what I meant at all in the best way. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's incredible. Because like I had an artist named Alant do like a space station for me, and then the iconic like character class type stuff for
Yeah.
the book. And like I brought, you know, we worked on references and stuff beforehand, but once I actually got the art, I was just like shook with like how much it helped me get immersed in my own project, seeing somebody else play with the tools that I was developing, and even in visual language. So for you, where like when it comes to creating a bunch of art for the book, where are you at in the book development? How much art have you guys already created? You know, like what's that process been like?
Yeah, so I think there's about 50. I I want to say 50%, but I know that there's going to be like one or two things where I'm like, if we could just add like a piece here
Yeah.
or there. So I'm going to say like 45% of the art has been like to the black and white stage.
Okay.
Or the like finished side of things. There is color that needs to be put on a majority of them. The process is pretty straightforward. I think like with fairy tales, it's again going back to Han Solo.
Yeah.
It's not that obscure, so it's been pretty easy to collaborate and come up with like, oh, this is what I'm looking for. This is what I'm trying to evoke, and there seems to be a lot of like to use more of like a hobby or a crafter term. There's a lot of like kit bashing in a way,
Yeah.
to where it's like, oh, I like this and I like this and I like
Right.
this, and then presenting that and saying, you know, what can we do with this?
Yeah, that's fun. I mean, again, even in the collaboration side, that's kind of
Yeah,
what it is, right? Like it's the same thing with the tropes that we were talking about before. It's like the commonalities that we can find. It's like, okay, there's these weird things that we both know what we're talking about. There's A and there's Z, but I want to put them next to each other. It's like, oh, interesting. That's different. So yeah, I mean, I haven't gotten to collaborate on that level with a sibling before, but that sounds like a blast. So when it came to launching the project, how much of the book was done before you pulled the trigger on a campaign?
so the with the OSR,
Oh, right,
with
the
the
first one.
OSR like core rules, yeah, that one I had all player rules. I had gone through like 5 playtests,
Oh wow.
just like one shots to see
Yep.
like, okay, what broke, what could be kind of fixed, because I wanted to be able to present. So like 2 weeks after that campaign ended, everybody would get like the ability to play. Like they would get all player rules. And then with the most recent one, so the 5e supplement, I would say it was it wasn't as much, because I had spent more time like on rules development, and they were pretty close, but still enough to be like, oh, you're gonna get like magic items,
Right.
denizens, creatures or monsters, as well as spells, etc.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did the very chaotic thing of having like the roughest of rough drafts ready before I'm like, I'm going to pitch this concept to the world.
What
And
a
I'm
publisher
like,
would love.
never
right?
doing that again.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I plan on participating in Zine Quest of next year. I don't know what I'm doing for it yet, but I will know soon. Now that I'm like actually in the printing stage of the last project, I'm like, okay, cool. That took me 5 months. So now I have like a little bit of time before the next one comes around. But yeah, I mean, when it comes to any crowdfunding, I think that what's wildly validating is presenting an idea to the world and seeing people get excited about it. You know, which, you know,
Yeah.
I think that is really cool. And Kickstarter is really good, quote unquote, at getting your project visible on, you know, like as compared to just like trying to post on other platforms. Because visibility is a nightmare on anything meta related or even TikTok. Often it's a nightmare to get things
Yeah.
visible to the people that you want it to. So it was surprising to me to see how well Kickstarter did push my project when I launched through their platform, having no prior work under my belt. But
Yeah.
since you're not planning on going the route of Kickstarter in the future, are you building up like Discord community? Are you building up like email lists? What's your plan for like kind of as NotHandsome, right?
I have a couple like pay what you want on itch.io as well as drive through at the moment, so you can like go check that out, download those. I've also created like a little pamphlet game. It's a party style game, just like within the nature of like, oh, what could I do within 48 hours? So it's a little rough and ready, but I feel like
That's fun.
Yeah, it was fun to be able to just like create something, publish it, like and test the waters with like, oh, what does drive through
Right.
RPGs like distribution look like? What is that process to get something
Yeah, I
published?
saw that you were having the fulfillment go through them. I was like, I
Yeah.
have no idea how to do that because I decided to. I went the
Well, just
laziest route ever with
yeah,
how I actually am fulfilling some of my rewards right now. I'm not technically fulfilling rewards yet, is what's really happening, because I made the game pay what you want on itch and then said to
yeah,
my backers, hey, this is the early access like beta of things, and then I'm intaking like feedback from people that have played it, and so I have a
yeah,
feedback form and stuff, so it's like an early stage. But I didn't go the route of like trying to get a bunch of keys and then distribute all the keys and all that stuff, because
yeah,
I'm like, this is overwhelming right now and I just want people to play and make sure that
yeah.
it looks good.
Yeah, yeah, and I think you'll pull a wider audience with that as well, like people that are interested.
Yeah, there's something
I
about the
yeah,
free, right? The like, here, check it out, and then if you like it, pay for it kind of thing that just fits more of my ethos. Because it's like, yes, I'd love to make a living at this, really would.
yeah,
Not planning on it right now. I'd rather build a reputation and a relationship with other people, to say like, hey, I'm making games. Hopefully you like them, and so like that's been, hopefully beneficial for me. But when it comes to Fabled Empire, I know it's up in the air. Probably it's fresh off the back end of the Kickstarter. What are your more immediate next steps, and how can people find you and interact with your content, stay up to date on Fabled Empire?
yeah. So the best is going to be jumping on the mailing list, which is at nathandsome.com, N-A-T, handsome.com. And you can sign up for the mailing list right there. Follow me anywhere, like at NatHandsome Games, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, etc. Not X though. I think I moved away from that a long time ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I went on
Yeah.
there because I saw that I was getting some stuff through itch. I was like, oh, who's posting about my game on itch? Or sorry, who's posting on
Oh.
X? And I was like, oh man, I haven't been here in a while.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
man. Well, that's
Times have
awesome.
changed.
Yeah, right. Well, thank you so much for hanging out. I'm excited to see where Fabled Empire goes. It's been a pleasure talking to you about games and nerding out about favorite fairy tales and whatnot. Thank you so much for being on.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
If you would like to support One Shots Tavern and the interviews and actual plays that we do here, you can find us over at oneshotstavern.com. There you can access all of our podcast links as well as our merch store and our Patreon. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.